We are creatures of desire. What we most desire is meaning. What makes us suffer most is a lack of meaning.
The Meaningful Life with Andrew G. Marshall. Marital therapist, author, and communications trainer Andrew G. Marshall invites guests from all walks of life to discuss what makes life meaningful.
Hello, I'm Andrew G. Marshall. Welcome to The Meaningful Life. We're available on Apple, Spotify, Podbean, and wherever you find your podcasts. My parents believed that feelings were best avoided. Not only did they not trust them, but they believed they made everything worse. My school promoted being rational, getting your head down and getting on with it, hopefully upwards and onwards. I think it's a message that men in particular have been given, so that's why I'm going to be addressing them in particular today, and of course the women who love them. My question is, why do men resist unwanted feelings, and how does it impact on themselves and everyone around them? My witness was a captain in the US Air Force, but at 26 he felt dead inside, and in 2001 threw it all in to walk around the world. A few weeks later, he had a meltdown in an old telephone box in Wales. He couldn't go back to his old life, and he had no idea what to do next. He tried living with a holy man in India, an 8-month marriage to a woman in France, and launching a company which went on to be worth $50 million. But he still felt that something was lacking. Bryan Reeves is an internationally renowned relationship coach and the host of the podcast Men This Way, and the author of Choose Her Every Day or Leave, a guide through the transformational fires of love and intimacy. The big problem for men is that nobody teaches us about emotions or relationships. So how did this come to a head in that phone box in Wales?
Well, hey, Andrew. What's up, man? Good to see you. Before we dive into that, just want to say I want to compliment you on your beard game. Some great beard game going on.
I've been working on this one for a very long time.
Yeah, I can tell. Yeah, it looks good. And that's true. That happened to me 30 days after I'd just gotten out of the Air Force, and I just felt dead inside. I couldn't feel anything. I couldn't laugh. I couldn't cry. I was 26. Like my soul all I had left was the tiniest little pilot light of inspiration inside of me. And that's the thing that kept me from just going and getting a corporate job or working for some defense contractor and just continuing that trajectory. But I went walkabout into the world, and 30 days after that began, after I had flew from the States, Andrews Air Force Base in Washington, D.C., I flew over to Royal Air Force Base. Is it Lakenheath or is that farther north? I can't remember. Anyway, a friend of mine was stationed there flying, I think F-15s at the time. Anyway, I went to visit him, and then him and his wife drove me over to Wales and just dropped me off at a hostel where I just started backpacking. Went over to Ireland. I felt so free. Andrew, all I'd wanted to do was feel freedom. The military just was so constricting, and I needed to explore. I needed to encounter mystery. Right? The mystery of life. Ask the big questions. Who am I really? Like, those are the questions of adolescence that I didn't really get to ask. Or as I was asking them, the military told me, "What do you mean, who are you? I know you're a lieutenant. You're a captain. This is what you're supposed to do. This is who you are. You're a government issue, GI. You're property of the government. We'll tell you. Don't ask who you are. We'll tell you who you are and what to do." Anyway, I did that for 10 years, and it just killed me. I just died inside. So after 30 days in Wales and in Ireland, feeling free, but also not quite able to shake the heaviness of what I had just been through, growing up a boy in this culture, and then being in a fraternity in college, and then going into the military, just utterly disconnected from myself. 30 days later, I had what I call a nervous breakdown in a phone booth in North Wales. I hadn't been treated well on my travels, Andrew, and I had been used to being treated well. I was a captain in the world's most powerful Air Force. I had respect. I had prestige. People looked up to me. At only 25 years old. And now all of a sudden I'm a traveling vagabond, growing my hair long and wearing an earring and
probably unshaven as well.
Totally unshaven, exactly. Trying to get my hands on, whatever marijuana I could find. And I wasn't treated well by people at times. I was treated the way that I guess they perceived me to be, as a vagabond. So I get to this phone booth and I don't know where to go at this point. I make a few phone calls. Nobody's answering the phone. I called my mom. She didn't answer the phone. I called my uncle. Let's see. Do you know Uri Geller?
Not personally, but he's the spoon bender.
Yeah, the spoon bender. Well, Ori was a friend of the family, close friend. In fact, I'd been to his home in Reading. He lived in Reading on Thames way back in the day. And I'd been there before and thought, well, I'll call him and maybe, he can take me in. And I got him on the phone, but he said, I'm sorry, you can't come in. I think he was marrying Michael Jackson, or Michael Jackson was remarrying him and his wife and all this security. And he was like, I'm sorry, this is happening. We have no place for you. All right, well, so much for family. My dad didn't answer the phone. I called my ex-girlfriend that I had broken up with to go on this trip, and she answered the phone. And Andrew, I just broke open. I sobbed and sobbed because a few things. I didn't know who I was anymore. My identity was in question, and I had no answers for that. In my travels, people would ask me, tell me about you. Who are you? The first thing I would run to is I'm a captain in the Air Force. That's all I knew to tell people. And I wasn't even that anymore. And I didn't want to be that, but I didn't know what else I was. And so that phone booth in North Wales was a, maybe because also in a weird way, I felt contained in that phone booth. It was like, it was, you step into it. It's I don't know, what is it? 2 feet by 2 feet. It's tiny. It was like a little womb. And I just collapsed when I heard my ex-girlfriend's voice, and she was so sympathetic, but also not available, and I couldn't go back to her. But man, I was a fucking mess, Andrew, is the point. I just fell apart. And that was a very cathartic and pivotal moment, because rather than just rush off to somewhere new, which is what I'd been trying to do my whole life, just change the scene so I can feel better about myself and about things, that restlessness. I just stayed. I stayed in, I can't remember the name of the village. It was not far from the ferry over to Ireland. But I decided to just stay there at that hostel for 3 days. And it was February of 2001, I think. So it was cold. It was cold and dreary in a way, but it was perfect. It was just what I needed to, I think, really just be with, talk about feeling. It was like the first time in probably a decade that I'd had a really powerful feeling that overwhelmed me, that I allowed, or that just took me over, because I'd been just dead inside up to that moment.
But that little moment, that pilot light, was enough to keep you moving onwards, and you went on a journey. And I've picked out 3 particular moments in that journey because I think they represent quite well sort of our gut sort of feelings of how to deal with this emptiness inside. And I'd be interested to see how they worked for you. The first one was the holy man in India, which is sort of, sometimes people use the spiritual thing to sort of bypass all their feelings. So they'll become enlightened and they don't have to deal with their feelings. So tell me about the holy man in India, because I think he was quite an abrasive personality.
Well, yeah, he was an interesting character. So again, another family friend. I come from an interesting family, Andrew. So this holy man in India was also a friend of my stepmother's, who came into my life when I was 10. But anyway, so he was a self-anointed guru who had taken a vow of silence like 40 years prior. He was probably in his 60s. But the thing is, Andrew, he spoke as much or more than anyone I had ever met. Not with his mouth, but he would sign. He would use sign language, and he had these women that had abandoned everything in their lives to follow him, and they would interpret for him. So he'd taken a vow of silence, and yet he loved to talk. He loved to command the stage. And the stories he shared, I probably heard him say the same story 15 times over and they were all about how great he was. So he was a suspicious character, had an altar to himself in his home. a bit much. I wasn't really going to worship with him, or just, I was traveling. I was just, again, exploring the world, and family friend in India. Let's go see what this is about. I was with him for, gosh, I don't know, maybe a month. And I left pretty quickly when he made it clear to me that I was no longer a guest and it's time for me to follow him or be gone. And I chose to be gone. I wasn't looking for a guru. I've never been the guru sort. Anyway, I left, and then I went on to Australia and to Egypt. I lived in Egypt for a time, but that's the short guru story.
And the thing that a lot of men do if they want to try and sort out their lives is they recruit a woman to do it for them. And what better way to recruit a woman is to actually marry her, because women are going to save men. Oh. It's a well-known fact, he says with a little bit of irony in his voice. Yeah. So tell me about marriage in France, because that could have been the solution.
Well, it's actually interesting. I'm just seeing this now, because I would later use spirituality as a bypass. When I came back to America, I would use spirituality as a bypass, but I wasn't ready for that yet. I was still looking to be saved, indeed, from a woman, by a woman, not from a woman, but by a woman. So I met this woman in France when I was studying French, living in Bordeaux. Again, I still couldn't really feel much. I was still very disconnected from my emotions, my body, my intuition, all of that. I met this woman who, it's interesting because where the guru, this older man, said, "Follow me," I said, "No, thanks. I'll leave now." This woman essentially picked me and said, "Follow me." And I said, "Oh, yes, please. Gladly. Thank you for rescuing me." I didn't trust an older man, but I trusted in a woman to save me. There's something in there, Andrew. But yes, I married this woman 5 weeks after meeting her.
What could possibly go wrong?
That's what I figured. That's exactly, the night before we actually did our wedding ceremony, there was a voice inside of me that said, "Don't do this." It was clear. It was precise. It didn't give me a lot of explanation. It just said, "Don't do this."
Did you listen to that voice?
I did not.
Oops.
I did not. I did not listen to that voice, Andrew, because on some level I needed my life to be smashed up against the rocks. I needed it. I didn't consciously.
Why did you need it?
Why did I need it? Because the psychological structures that I had developed through my life experiences up to that point, such as, right, you were talking about some of the messages, such as, boys don't cry. I go into the military. There's no crying in the military. You don't get to have feelings in the military. You don't get to even have opinions that the government doesn't give you in the military. All these psychological structures I had built up, this armor that I was wearing, the only way I was going to de-armor was by getting smashed up against rocks so hard that the armor couldn't withstand it. And I think a lot of us men, we choose through relationship because we don't really have boyhood to manhood initiation rites of passage. So we grow into these men that become very armored up. We're not truly open to the world and to the moment, and our sensitivities get buried. Men are deeply, deeply sensitive, but there's this cliche, this idea that we're not, that we're insensitive creatures. And the opposite is the truth. We are deeply, deeply sensitive. We start out very sensitive as boys, but by the time we start to hit adolescence, that starts to get shamed, dismissed, devalued out of us.
Yeah, we get this message, be cool, don't we?
Exactly. And, and feelings are for girls.
Feelings are for sissies, even worse than being for girls.
Worse than girls. Right. A girly girl. So, and we need, in lieu of older men initiating us through these boyhood structures into a true, mature adult, like a return to our sensitivity, but in a mature fashion. We don't have that. So instead, we tend to choose women or intimate relationship anyway, where we are confronted with the feminine aspects of ourselves. And at first, we tend to not like what we see because we've been rejecting it our whole lives. And all of a sudden, here it shows up in an intimate relationship, and yet we're just supposed to embrace it? No. So therein lies the train, the impending train wreck collision that we're soon confronted with.
And did this all happen, or did all these fights happen in French, or were you doing them at least in English?
Well, probably with my wife at the time, they happened in French, but with her mother, my mother-in-law, I'm sorry, they happened in English with my wife. With her mother, my mother-in-law, they happened in French. And that's actually what ended the marriage. I got into an argument with her mom, who was trying to blame me for all of the challenges that me and her daughter were having. And I spent 30 minutes arguing with her in French about why that's not true and all the things I'm doing, being very defensive, trying to prove myself and show her all these things that she couldn't or wasn't willing to see. And finally, Andrew, when I realized this is futile, I decided I'd use a phrase that I had heard people say. And that phrase is "tu me fais chier." Do you know what that means?
I have no idea.
The direct translation is "you make me shit." So I told my mother-in-law, "You make me shit." And that did not go over well. I didn't really know what I was playing with in that moment. I just knew I wanted to be out of this conversation. I was done. Well, she did not react well to that. I think that's essentially the English equivalent of "go fuck yourself." And yeah, her daughter came home. Her daughter wasn't there at that moment. She came home and her mom told her what happened. And the daughter, my wife at the time, gave me 2 hours to get out. And that was that. Yeah.
So you return to America and you try the third thing that men are told, because if you're a great success, then all problems are magically solved. That's
right. I would spend the next, in fact, I mean, in various shades throughout the next 20 years or so. Now, I'm 50 now, so I came back to the States when I was probably, I think, about 28 or 29. I was only overseas, having left the military, been married, lived with this guru, traveled. I spent a couple months in Egypt, in Australia. That all lasted about 2 years. So I probably was about 28 or 29 when I came back, and I moved in with my father. That's a whole other journey.
Men do need to make peace with their fathers, so that's probably a best place to start.
Whether or not we are in relationship with them. And I am actually not in relationship with my father, who is alive. We are not in relationship, and I have made a deep, deep peace with that reality. It took me many, many years, because that was the first time I'd really gotten to know him. He left when I was young, and I moved in with him when I was, 28, and started to work with him to help him build a business. And that business within 5 years was valued at $50 million. And so we had meteoric success. But yeah, that didn't solve problems. That just gave us a whole host of other problems. And because I think our consciousness of that community of the collective, the people who were building that business, the consciousness was such that, no one could own shadow. No one was really introspective. Nobody could take responsibility for their projections on each other. It was a shit show. It became a shit show during that time, especially, the more money you make, kind of the bigger shit show it can become. And I left that company about maybe 2 months before my dad's business partners stole the company from him and locked him out. So he went from making a lot of money to basically nothing within a month, within a 30-day period. That was a shock to him and everyone.
So if spirituality is not the magic answer that leaps us over our problems, if women are not going to solve it and being successful is not going to solve it, where do we start?
Where do we start? Well, I think we start with those things. I think every man needs to figure that out for himself to some degree. Go do your spiritual practice and become good at a spiritual practice, right? Become practiced at a spiritual practice, whether that's meditating or some kind of devotional practice or praying to a certain deity or going to church, whatever it is. Go do your spiritual practice, right? Go do it such that you realize, okay, this is helpful and it's important, but this is not the answer to all of my problems. Same, go be in relationship with a woman. Go put all your expectations on that person, right? Try that out. If you think that a woman is going to save you, go play that out. in my work with men around relationships, my co-facilitator a number of years ago when we were building our Elevate Your Relationship program for men, one of the words we kind of fought over was hope. The word hope, right? My partner wanted to promise men that if you come into our program, you get hope that things will blah, blah, blah. And I wanted to stand for the opposite. Actually, abandon all hope, ye who enter, right? Abandon the hope that things will be better. Abandon the hope that you will somehow be rescued or saved by this woman or this relationship. That has been, for me, transformative, because ironically, things get way better once we abandon the hope that, even this ultimate pursuit of freedom, which I think men do in their spiritual practice, they do. It's like the underlying it all is the ultimate escape that we're looking for, right? And again, our spiritual practice, there's this idea we'll get to this blissful place where we will never experience a problem that will feel burdensome or we'll feel trapped by ever again. A woman will, somehow love us, touch us, bring us to ecstasy, transform us, bring us to the ultimate ecstasy, such that
turn us into a hero,
turn us into the perpetual hero that will just feel free on top of the world.
Well, at least we'll have great sex while we're struggling.
Well, and the great sex that's the ultimate escape too from our struggle, right? The ultimate orgasm. And likewise, that last part, even success. If I'm successful enough, I'll feel free of the burdens of what life brings. And when we discover that actually none of those things will ever, ever give us that ultimate freedom, that idealized freedom that we think is available. I watch, Andrew, in my country, you may have noticed there's great political discord these days.
Yep.
Well, one of the resurgent cries that even at least on the surface, very powerful looking men speak to is the cry for freedom. Well, freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of whatever, freedom to not take a vaccine, body freedom. They argue it for themselves, not so much for other people as much. But this loud cry for freedom. And what I notice, and this is just my judgment, but some of these largely men, sometimes women, that are in this impassioned cry for freedom, I don't experience them as very free.
Yeah, they seem very angry, I would say.
Yes, very angry. It's like they're trapped in the fight for freedom. Whereas, in the end, again, abandoning all hope, ye who enter. There is no woman that will save us. There is no relationship that will save us. There is no dollar sign. There's no amount of money that will save us. There is no spiritual practice that will save us. Life is a tragedy. It is a comedy and a tragedy, and we will die, and we will get old, and we will get sick, and we will fade away. Everything we've ever created will fade away. And so, abandoning hope, I think, is actually an essential practice.
So we've abandoned hope. What do we do next?
Yeah. Well, we fight the temptation to cynicism.
Oh, yes, that's another one, isn't it? Won't get fooled again.
We fight the temptation to cynicism, because that's when I talk about abandoning hope, well, a lot of it's easy to turn that into, well, then what's the point of anything?
Well, it's one of the ways when men don't actually deal with their feelings, they become grumpy and sarcastic. And that's all exactly what you're saying. Yeah.
Sarcastic, cynical, just all kinds of, unhelpful, deadening behaviors arise. We numb out, distract ourselves with shit that doesn't really matter to anybody, including ourselves on some level. And so we have to fight that temptation, right? Abandoning hope. It's kind of like, I forget who said this, but I heard this beautiful idea lately. I think it was maybe Walt Whitman, one of the great American writers, said something like I'm paraphrasing, but the mark of an intelligent mind is that it can recognize that all hope is lost, and yet won't give up in trying to make the world a better place anyway.
We've got to hold two ideas in our mind at the same time. And I think a lot of deep psychological work is about holding two things in mind at the same time. That we're going to give up hope, but we're not going to give up hope.
Exactly. That's right. It's like giving up hope doesn't mean then resorting to cynicism. That's not the alternative. Giving up hope is really, if anything, it's a reclaiming of power in an interesting way, right? The power to own my experience in this moment. There's this transition in men's work. Andrew, I wonder. I'm sure you've worked with this and are working with this through your work. The old school masculine idea of power over. Right? I will dominate the earth. I will dominate people. I must conquer everything in front of me in order to be successful, in order to have status, in order to be a man. And the paradigm shift that I think a mature, responsible adulthood we make is power over becomes power with, right? We power with, like in partnership with life.
And I think, the most important thing is power and relationship with our own feelings. Because for me, the answer is nearly always within, that you have to listen to yourself. You have to be aware of your feelings, because your feelings are telling you really important things. Yes. Your feelings. I'm a student of Carl Jung's work. Have you studied Carl Jung's work and shadow work? Yeah. That's central to a lot of the thoughts and things that I work with as well. And we often have Jungians on this podcast as well.
Oh, great. I'm actually in a year-long coaching certificate program that is purely focused on Jungian work and incorporating that into the coaching realm. And I'm just really enjoying it, loving it so much. And it's one of the deeper distinctions that I'm also learning myself about feelings and emotions, and how our feelings are indeed they're messengers of sorts. There's wisdom there. They're saying something. They're protectors. They're indicators of something.
My most beautiful question I ask people is, what is the feeling trying to tell you?
Right. What is the feeling trying to tell you? And often, and there's a distinction that I've learned recently, the difference between a feeling and an emotion, right? A feeling, for example, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this as well, because for a long time, I didn't make a big distinction between the two. And as I've gotten into more depth psychology study, I'm understanding this at a interestingly, of course, deeper level. But a feeling might be my wife says something to me, or a friend says something to me, maybe uses sarcasm. Sarcasm is something I don't particularly enjoy being exposed to. And I have an Australian friend who, Australians, that's the language of their country, is sarcasm. So I have an immediate feeling, and the feeling is anger, like a tightness, like I should say my body tightens. I feel my throat start to constrict. My face gets flush. Like I have all these feelings in my body that if I just stay there, I'll call it anger. And I won't necessarily be wrong, but what I'm learning is underneath the feeling is a protector of a deeper emotional experience, which is actually, in this example, it's sadness, profound sadness. And the anger is a kind of guardian at the gate, right? I think the fear for a lot of men, I wonder what you think about this, Andrew. The fear for a lot of men is that if we let ourselves feel something, it will never escape the feeling.
Yeah, we're going to be sad for the whole of the weekend.
Or the rest of our lives. And we can't abide that because that gets in the way of being productive. It gets in the way of getting shit done. It gets in the way of being a man.
And who wants to be sad for the rest of their lives anyway?
And who wants to feel that? Exactly. And I think similar in our relationships, I've noticed, that same kind of resistance shows up where we men can't be with our partner's feelings either.
Because, and this is ludicrous, but we feel in some way responsible for it. So,
right.
So because we're responsible for, say, for example, our wife's sadness, we then try and reduce the level of it. So you're not really that sad, because if it's a smaller size, I can actually possibly cope with it and maybe even ignore it altogether, sort of kind of thing. So not only can I not accept your feelings, but I'm going to try and make them smaller, which, by the way, will just make her angry.
Right.
And then
Just makes them bigger.
you've got another one too. And then you tell her that she's not quite so angry.
Right.
You are not responsible for your partner's feelings, however much you love them.
And I think, I think the value, one of the beautiful gifts of connecting to what we're feeling, to our bodies, is, as we've been pointing at, again, come back to this example of my friend and his sarcasm and how that has affected me. As I've sat with the deeper emotion, the sadness, and it's not that I really had anyone sarcastic in my life before, but I have felt dismissed by other men throughout my childhood. And sarcasm is a very dismissive form of communication.
Did you feel dismissed by your father?
Oh, I felt completely, my opinions were never welcome with my father or my stepfather. The two men that I grew up with didn't generally want to hear what I had to say about anything, and especially then, my father, as I got to know him, especially as a man, and man, yeah, he was not open. He always wanted to be the teacher, always wanted to be the one who knew what was what.
And immediately we can see just from that little bit of sarcasm, we're into something really deep. And, I can sense the feelings here in this video space together. Those feelings are alive and well.
Exactly. And if I'm not conscious that this is what's happening, the moment my friend is sarcastic, I just want to tell him to go fuck himself.
Be dismissive back, effectively.
Give it right back to him. Exactly. And rather, being able to sit with that. I don't really have a lot of sarcastic friends, but I got this one, and I love him to death, and he's a good man. Again, it's a cultural thing. And as I've been in friendship with him over these few years, I've been able to sit with that sadness, the deeper sadness, and be with that, and realize and remember, it's not about my friend. He's just doing what he does. He's just communicating as he communicates. And yeah, I don't like it. I don't particularly enjoy it. It's not a helpful form of communication, not for me. But I'm no longer, my immediate response is no longer to tell him to go fuck himself. Right?
Now, when we started setting up this program and you gave me the title, Why Do Men Resist Unwanted Feelings? I thought that was a really brilliant way of actually phrasing it. Tell me why you use the word unwanted feelings. Yeah,
great question. Unwanted, because I don't like to place value judgments on feelings, good or bad. Good feelings, bad feelings. They're just feelings. I don't find those words helpful, good or bad.
Neither do I.
Even positive or negative, I don't really find those helpful when we're talking about what's happening in the body. We're making value judgments. Positive implies that I want that feeling. Negative implies I don't want that feeling. At least in my formulation of it and the way I perceive it. So I find it more valuable, more useful, let's say, to use words. Like in the same way, when I do relationship work, when I'm working with a couple, we abandon the words right and wrong. We don't use those words because they only invite argument, right? They only invite disconnection. We get lost in our heads. And I think to use the word unwanted feelings, I think is a very simple, and every man gets to decide for himself. Some men don't want to feel joy.
Really?
I mean, they may say they want to, but then, the woman maybe they love the most walks into the room and she's feeling joyful, and he may want to shut that down, get angry. Why is she feeling so joyful? What the fuck do you have to be happy about? Don't you see all these problems we have?
This is something that I think a lot of men don't understand. If you try and shut down the unwanted feelings like fear and sadness and anger, you can't just choose, I'll have this one, and this one. You end up shutting off all your feelings. So exactly. The joy and the pleasure and all those other things, those are shut down too.
Yeah, when I got out of the military, I couldn't cry. That's not unusual for men, right? We all get that one. But what was also true, Andrew, was I couldn't really laugh either. My laughter was, neck and higher. My body wasn't involved in any laughing that I would ever do. And I didn't know that. I didn't know that at the time. I learned that when I was 30, I turned 30 years old, and I did my first psilocybin mushroom journey. And Andrew, I laughed from a place in my body that I had never, ever touched before. Maybe since I was a child. And even in my home, my parents, there was a lot of fighting. My dad left when I was 4. There was a lot of sadness, a lot of stress. I'm not even sure I really laughed like that as a child. Maybe. I don't remember. But I certainly hadn't, for most of my childhood and my adult years until mushrooms unleashed a laughter in me that never then left me. It's like I rediscovered a part of my feeling capacity that had been dormant. So that's what I mean. We men, it's not a conscious resistance necessarily of joy, the feelings that we might otherwise label as positive, right? But it's to your, as you astutely pointed out, if we resist anger, we limit our capacity to feel enthusiasm as well, and excitement and joy.
And the second part is that this doesn't just hurt ourselves, but it also hurts everybody around us. So why, if we're toning down our emotions, which, helps everything run along a little bit more smoothly, why does that hurt other people?
There's an inherent tension that I'm often working with when I do work with couples. It's the tension between mission and relationship. Mission and relationship. You might also look at it, the tension between the archetypes of the warrior and the lover.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the warrior, very, very simplistic terms here, the warrior is all about being on mission. I got shit to do. I got battles to fight.
I've got a $50 million company to launch.
Exactly. In the Mission Impossible movies with Tom Cruise, his character, Ethan Hunt, he gets married in one of the episodes. Well, as it plays out, he makes a conscious choice not to stay married. He has to make a choice between saving the world, which means literally if he doesn't go and do his mission, 3 billion people will die. Or he can be married. That's the choice. That's literally cooked into the plot.
I love these Hollywood films. They really make these dilemmas so simple to see.
They do. It's true. They do. We still don't see it, but it's right there screaming at us, right? Someone still has to call it out. But there it is. It's cooked into the plot. He has to choose between saving the world and billions of people dying or just being in relationship to his woman that he loves. And of course, what does he do? The noble thing, save the world.
And he thinks that if he saves the world and launches the $50 million company, he's going to get the woman anyway. As sort of like a bonus prize.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's probably true. But what we see in these kind of action hero movies is that the hero actually, he does get the woman, but he gets to get rid of her after a weekend. He doesn't keep her. He doesn't have to keep her.
James Bond goes off into the sunset with some gorgeous woman, but you don't think it's going to last any longer than a hot night of passion.
No, he's single at the beginning of the next movie. He's got to reset that clock. Again, it's rampant because once the guy gets the woman, it's like the fairy tale ends at the marriage. We don't see what happens beyond, because we live in a heroic culture. We value the hero, and the hero is by definition alone.
So we're trying to see how the impact of choosing warrior over lover has on the people around men, the people that they love.
Well, it hurts because it is the warrior. If we stay in warrior energy, in mission mode, we have to withdraw love, by which I mean attention, focus, presence, energy. We have to withdraw those things because our mission needs those things. Our mission needs our focus, our energy, our attention, our resources. The mission needs that.
And there's a second problem I find with the sort of damp down all your feelings, be a nice guy, don't say anything to rock the boat too much, lower your emotions, is on an unconscious level, a deep level, the women feel very unsure. They don't know where they stand, and they fear that at some point the volcano is going to blow, I suppose.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's ironic that a lot of men, we shut down our emotions because we think that makes us trustworthy. And yet often the opposite happens. It makes us less trustworthy. I work with a lot of the nice guy syndrome, right? You work with a lot of nice guy syndrome?
Yep.
And one of the beliefs the nice guy has is I'm not allowed to share how I really feel, because that'll upset people. It'll push people away.
Here's another Hollywood movie cliche. You can't handle it.
Right. You can't handle the truth. Yeah, you can't handle it. And ironically and tragically, the nice guy's doing that because he thinks it makes him safe. It thinks it keeps, the more conscious belief is I need to do this so that she or my partner or my kid, whoever, feels safe with me. I don't hurt them. But the deeper unconscious shadow of that is, if I say how I really feel, I won't be safe. They'll leave me. I'll be abandoned. They won't love me. And so the very thing that we fear, they won't love me, they'll abandon me, they'll leave me, is often what we create. I worked with a man that had been married for 16 years and played the nice guy for 16 years. And when he came to me, he was in a sexless marriage, loved his wife dearly. And they didn't have any, they were not in conflict ever, but they hadn't had sex in years. She was, he loved her, thought she was beautiful. He was attracted to her. And when we started to work together, he started to share his true feelings with her, but in a way it was kind of too late for her. She had lost trust in him a long time ago, right? She had lost attraction to him.
Trust and attraction go hand in hand, I think I'm hearing you say.
Yes, they go hand in hand. I mean, certainly beyond the initial, the first date.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, attraction just happens anywhere. You don't need any trust at all for instant chemical attraction to happen. But once you get into actual relationship, then trust is essential. And it's not just trust that you won't kill me. I think a lot of men associate trust with, look, she knows I won't cheat on her. She knows I'm not going to hit her. She knows I'm going to come home to her at night. I'm going to, go to work and do what I say. What else is there for me to account for? And what is more for us to account for is being authentic around what we're feeling, around what we're really experiencing, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it might create conflict.
So we're going to look at a letter from my casebook, which sort of speaks to this issue about men and their feelings, and particularly the theme of unwanted feelings. And we'll be doing that in just a moment.
The Meaningful Life with Andrew G. Marshall. Please follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and visit our website, andrewgmarshall.com/podcast, where you can join our supporters club and unlock bonus material and other benefits.
Guess how long I've been helping couples have more fulfilling relationships? The answer shocked me. 39 years. Over this time, I've developed all sorts of interventions to help couples communicate better and make meaningful changes to protect and nurture their love. Some ideas I've used for a while and dropped, but at the core, there are a handful of must-haves that I use with all the couples I see face to face. Sadly, I can't work with everyone who wants my help, but I can share my best relationship tools. I've put them in a new course with worksheets and links to my most helpful podcasts. There are 4 hours of instructions to do at your pace together, with your partner or on your own. And it normally retails at £150. But to launch, I've dropped them to a special introductory price of £99.50. If you'd like to find out more, go to andrewgmarshall.com/tools and get started on improving your relationship.
Podbean, your message amplified.
Ready to share your message with the world? Start your podcast journey with Podbean.
Podbean, the AI-powered all-in-one podcast platform.
Thousands of businesses and enterprises trust Podbean to launch their podcasts.
Use Podbean to record your podcast.
Use Podbean AI to optimize your podcast.
Use Podbean AI to turn your blog into a podcast.
Use Podbean to distribute your podcast everywhere.
Launch your podcast on Podbean today.
With the VSP Individual Vision Plan, you're the one pulling the strings. Because when getting vision coverage through work isn't an option, taking care of your eye health comes with a lot of decisions that only you should make. Like choosing how to save on the lens enhancements you need, the right name brand frames for your style, and choosing your eye doctor from the nation's largest independent doctor network. Even how you enroll is up to you. Make the best decisions for your vision at the eye doctor's office, retail locations, and online with VSP individual vision plans.
If you want to participate in the program and send us a letter in, go to andrewgmarshall.com/podcast and you'll find a form there. This one is short and not at all sweet. How do I forgive my wife for keeping a short affair while she was my fiancée, hidden from me for 23 years? And how do I know if they slept together because she doesn't remember a lot of the affair? I hope you can answer me because my mind is driving me insane. So we're back with trust again, aren't we?
Well, there's a number of layers that when you shared that question with me earlier, Andrew, I actually was working with a man just in the last couple weeks who was in a similar situation. I mean, this is an act of betrayal. Betrayal in that what you thought was true about your past with your wife is not entirely true. And in fact, there was a deep betrayal that happened. Doesn't matter that it happened 23 years ago. It happened, and you're finding about it now. And so I think it's first really important that man own and acknowledge for himself that is a betrayal.
And actually feel all those feelings of anger, fear, mistrust, all of them, because the first question is, how do I forgive my wife? So what he's almost saying is, how do I step over all of that stuff to get to the forgiveness? Right. And our first message is, you can't step over the feelings. You've got to have the feelings, even though they are unwanted.
Exactly. That's right. That's right. There's no bypassing to just get to forgive your wife. That's not going to happen until you first fully let yourself be in the experience of betrayal. And, what really stands out for me in this example too is the thing that this man thinks, remember, abandon all hope, ye who enter. The thing that this man thinks will help him get over the hump, which is poor choice of words there, but will help him get over this betrayal. Sorry. Is that if he knows with certainty what happened. And first off, that can be helpful potentially when couples are navigating betrayal, but there's something that happened so long ago that is genuinely not available. That certainty that he hopes for.
And it does feel a bit like a magic pill that if I find this piece of information, I'm going to swallow the pill and I'm going to feel better.
Exactly. And I'm imagining his brain is hoping that she can say with certainty she did not sleep with him. Right. So that will quiet that part of him that all the insecurities, all the things that arise for a man when he thinks about his partner sleeping with someone else. Right. But in this case, he doesn't get that certainty, right? His wife has already said she doesn't remember, and she could manufacture a story now to ease his mind, but he probably won't believe her.
And do you believe her? Because I'm sorry, but I think if somebody asked me did I sleep with this person 23 years ago, I think I would remember.
Well, I had the same thought, and I want to be careful with this, and here's why. On some level, if this man is going to ever get to forgive his wife, he's going to have to make peace with the fact that maybe she did sleep with him.
Yep.
And what he is going to need, I believe, from his wife is an acknowledgement of how much this hurts him. At some point, she's going to have to be able to say, I see how much this has devastated you.
Without trying to explain and to soften the blow and all those other things, which women are actually always complaining that men do, of negating their feelings.
Exactly. Whether or not she slept with him, this guy 23 years ago, she's at some point, and this is, I'm a huge fan of couples therapy or couples coaching, working with a third party to help you navigate these tricky conversations. Because, Andrew, as I said, I had the same thought. As I'm thinking back, in my memories of who I've slept with or who I didn't, it's quite possible that she's terrified of telling the truth to him because she knows he can't handle it and she can't handle it and the relationship may not be able to handle it. right? So getting a third, that's possible. I don't know what's really true for her. But getting a third party to help you navigate something like this, I think is going to be of vital importance.
I'm thinking that maybe this is a two-step approach. The first one is you need somebody where it's actually safe for you to unleash all your feelings, your anger and all those other things. Because if your wife is sitting in the room at the same time, she's not going to be able to cope with that. You sort of need to let the top off the volcano for it to be safely heard. All that anger, all that pain, the rejection, the hatred of the other man, the desire to go around and punch the living daylights out of him. All of that stuff has got to be heard and accepted because it's perfectly okay to have strong feelings.
Absolutely.
It's just, it's not okay to go around and beat the living daylights out of him. But there's a difference between the desire and the feelings and actually acting on it. So I think that some of the rage needs to be heard before his wife can hear it.
I think 100%. And doing that with other men or with a therapist or a coach or a trusted friend, somebody that won't judge you, won't try to fix it, won't tell you what to do, but can just hold that space for you to get it all out. And it could take a couple hours.
I mean, I think a couple of months I feel myself because it's... Yeah. It's big stuff.
Well, I mean, what I mean is in one session,
all right,
it could be a couple hours of you being in that emotion, right? It may not be a 50-minute therapy session. It might be a 2-hour hike with a friend, a buddy who just says, dude, just get it all out. And it doesn't mean it'll be done. You'll be done with it, but it might allow you to then come back to a conversation with your wife where you don't have to unload all that on her.
And the anger, I promise you, will not last forever. You'll just reach the point where you're exhausted and you'll feel a bit of catharsis, or, you'll come across something funny and you'll laugh for 30 seconds. The anger won't last forever. Some other things will break it.
And here's the thing about, well, again, I mentioned this earlier. I abolished the words right and wrong in my relationship work because I just don't think they're helpful. I don't think they're useful.
And do you know the therapist Terry Real?
Of course. I love Terry Real, yeah.
One of he bans his couples from arguing over who is right and who is wrong because, and I can back this up because I've done 40 years of couple work. Nobody has ever solved a problem by working out who's right and who's wrong. So not only does it not help, but you will actually deepen the problem.
Exactly. So arguing over, what she should have done or shouldn't have done or is not going to be helpful. That I like your framing of the two-step process. Like one is for this man to just be able to fully go into the emotional chaos that he needs to sit in and be in and do that in a safe way that doesn't just unleash on his wife. I think the second part of this that will have to happen at some point, and this is why also not unloading or unleashing on her, I think is of vital importance because she won't be able to get to this second point if he does this. To heal betrayal, there has to be an acknowledgement of how deeply hurtful the betrayal is for the betrayed partner. That there has to be an acknowledgement, a sincere, heartfelt, deeply felt acknowledgement of the impact of the betrayal by the person who committed the act. That has to be acknowledged. Otherwise, again, to restore, even to hope to restore trust and connection.
But if you can do this work, you will end up with a much deeper relationship than you've got at the moment. So I wish you all the best for that. And thank you very much for sharing from the heart with us. Well, you and I could probably talk not just for a couple of hours, but a couple of lifetimes, because I think we've got a lot to talk about.
Yeah,
we are going to continue with the bonus material. We're going to talk about something called masculine checkout syndrome in just a moment. But if you want to hear the bonus material, you can subscribe directly via Apple and Spotify, and we're available on Amazon Music. And in a moment, I'll give you the details about how you can become a supporter of The Meaningful Life. But before that, as a witness on The Meaningful Life, I need to ask you, what makes your life meaningful, Bryan?
What makes my life meaningful? Man, what's of vital importance to me is always looking beneath the surface of things. That's what makes life meaningful for me. I've always been, I think I've always like the archetype of the philosopher that lives at the edge of the woods, lives just outside the village and it lives in contemplation and
probably has a cauldron there, a bit like Merlin as well.
Definitely have a cauldron. Absolutely need a cauldron to throw all the things I find in the forest and see what happens when I cook them up this way and that way. And then, drink them myself to see what's the effect. Where does this take me?
How do you think I got my beard to grow so long?
Yeah, I believe it. And I think that's why the military was so painful for me, because it did not encourage or support looking beneath the surface. It didn't want me to ask bigger questions. It specifically told me I'm not allowed to. And it was excruciating to not be allowed to ask those questions, especially at a young age. So I think, really asking meaningful questions and living in those questions, I think is what makes life really meaningful for me.
What a beautiful place to live, living in the meaningful questions. So once again, if you want to become a supporter of The Meaningful Life and hear us talk about masculine checkout syndrome, here are the details.
You've been listening to The Meaningful Life with Andrew G. Marshall. You can follow Andrew on Twitter, like him on Facebook, and please leave a review wherever you consume your podcasts. Making, editing, and distributing The Meaningful Life comes with substantial costs, and we'd like to ask for your help. Visit our website, andrewgmarshall.com/podcast, where you can join our supporters club and unlock bonus material for every program, send in a letter to be discussed by Andrew and his guests, and join a community of other people seeking to make their life meaningful. At the gold level, you get even more benefits. Production of The Meaningful Life with Andrew G. Marshall is by Michael Dooney. Social media by Madeleine Healy. Sound engineering and theme tune by Sebastian de la Luz Mendoza. And I'm Susie Colick. Please tell your friends and spread the word. Thank you.
With the VSP Individual Vision Plan, you're the one pulling the strings. Because when getting vision coverage through work isn't an option, taking care of your eye health comes with a lot of decisions that only you should make. Like choosing how to save on the lens enhancements you need, the right name brand frames for your style, and choosing your eye doctor from the nation's largest independent doctor network. Even how you enroll is up to you. Make the best decisions for your vision at the eye doctor's office, retail locations, and online with VSP Individual Vision Plans.